The stamp set I'm using for this card is the Sheep Scene It set. This is quite a good way of doing a scene it. The frame is raised and therefore you're looking into the picture, makes your perspective easy. Okay, so I'm going to put that to one side, and what you need for this is a base card 15 centimeters by 15 centimeters. I've put the black layer on, which is the background, 135 millimeters square, and then I've got a watercolor frame 130 millimeters square, and then this will be the inside bit, about 110 millimeters square. Okay, so I'm starting with my frame, and what I need is my sheep and my VersaFine ink pad. I use VersaFine because it's waterproof, and when you use the clean colour pens, which I'm going to use, the outline won't bleed. Right, so I'm just pressing quite firmly there, and what I'm going to do next, actually I'll just have a little bit of grass on here. This little grass is quite useful just to elongate the scene. Okay, so that's the basis of my frame. I'm now going to use a die, a square die, and if I can find my pencil, there it is. So you've got your cutting edge. I'm turning it over. You could tape this in place using stencil tape, but I'm just going to draw round the inside like this. I'm doing it freehand, and then I've got my frame. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use a craft knife, or in my case a scalpel, and I'm just cutting around the outline. I need to go beyond the frame, so I've gone down to the bottom there and a little, about, you know, a centimetre or two in, and then that is cut round. So when I get my die cutting edge down, I can put that in, put it around the pencil line. I can still see the pencil line, but once it's gone through the machine, the pencil line will be cut off, so you don't even need to rub it out. So just put that through your machine like that, put a bit of tape on to keep it in place, and then when it comes out, obviously this hasn't got the die on it, we just take off the die and the stencil tape, and you're going to have that frame. Okay, and then put your wording on. You don't want to do it beforehand because it makes it difficult for the positioning. So this is the one we're going to work on. If that's a bit too difficult, or you haven't got a die, then you can just use, where is it? Here it is. You can just use the die and cut out a square, cut out your sheep separately, and do it that way. Okay, so there's alternatives, but this is what we're going to work with. Just move that out of the way. So I'm using my clean colour pens. I do have tutorials on the blog, on the website, teaching you how to use them, and I'm adding, you know, videos all the time. So I'm starting here with I don't want too light a grey, so I use grey tint, and I want to make this stand out against the lamb, so I'm just going round the edges and like this, and then I'm just going to use a wet paintbrush. Got some water here. I don't want the hard lines, but I don't want a white sheep either, so I'm just going in with the water in the middle and then patting it with a piece of kitchen towel, and that will give me a much softer look. And carry on like that until you've coloured both in. I use a different grey for the lamb just so that it's a bit different, and you can add a little bit of colour like this should you wish to. You can also use your Zig Millennium pen if you want to ground it and you know, just do a few lines so that it's all the way along like this. Okay, so that's the frame done. We'll do a bit more on it later, but that's what I want to do at this second. Right, now we come to the middle bit. So I want my smaller piece of card, and I'm going to use a press, my stamping press. So I'm going to, this is the Press to Impress. It's the one I use in my workshops. I've got, well, I don't know, about a dozen of them. We use them constantly. It's the one I like. So I'm just going to position my scene in place. And what I'm doing, because the house is on an angle and there are hills, you need to get it straight. So I'm looking, the tree is straight and the posts are straight. So I know that's how I want it. So I'm just going to bring it forward so you can see what I'm doing. I'm just inking up with the VersaFine. Like I said before, the VersaFine is waterproof once it's dry, but it does take a couple of minutes to dry. So bring that down like that. Okay. Yeah, that's the point of the press, because it's quite a detailed stamp. It didn't come out perfectly first time. Add a bit more ink. I know it's the top bit that hasn't come out, so nice firm pressure there. And that's perfect. So we'll bring that out, put my press to one side, and here's one I did earlier. This one's dry, because it does take a couple of minutes to dry. Obviously, this would normally take me about an hour to do. We haven't got an hour, we've got a few minutes. So what I'm doing is I'm just putting some peeled paint on here. You can do the whole thing with the clean colour, but this will just speed me up slightly, because all I'm going to do is I'm just going to put the green over as a base, a wash, and I'm just colouring the area that will be green, and then I can add the details with the clean colour. So this is just a quick way of working. Go around the sheet carefully if you can, but if you do go over the top, just use a little bit of clean water in the area, pat with a piece of kitchen towel, and the colour will come out. So there we go. So that's my basis on which to start. So I'll put that to one side. Here's one that's already dry, and I will carry on now with my colouring. So here I'm using number 72 beige, and I'm pulling out with number 71 natural beige. There we are, just to give me some shading. Because I've done that so quickly, I have actually just gone over the edge there. It won't matter, because I'm going to use, I'm going to colour that in anyway, but if I was worried about it, just put water into the area, tap with a piece of kitchen towel, and the colour comes out. So building up, we're just going to add colour wherever we want it. So I'm using a couple of pens here. This is number 44 deep green, 53 yellow green, and you'll see how I can change the scene completely. So this is the dark green, the deep green rather, and I'm pulling it out with the lighter colour. So I'm pulling the colour down, and because it's watercolour card, while I'm still moving it, it will blend. So here, just do that at the top and just pull it over. So this is what I'm saying, you can do the whole thing if you want to with your clean colour pens, but I want to, the wash just gave me a bit of speed. The other thing I'm doing is tip to tip, so I'm taking the dark onto the light. So here I've got a mid green. So again, I can keep changing it until I'm happy with it, and I'll do that over the whole card. I'm using, let me find a yellow, there it is. I'm going to just do yellow in that field. If that's too bright for you, you can mute it down with a little bit of green, but I think that gives me a nice contrast. And then you just keep building up. your scene until you've coloured. I'm going to stop there for a minute and then I'll come back and finish the card and put it together. So as you can see, I've started building up my picture. Here I'm using number 71 natural beige. It's also called flesh, and I'm just putting a bit of 72 beige on it and just pulling it over. And you can just put a little bit of colour where you want to and just blend it out till you get the effect you want. Here I'm just using the same colour as a path, and this time I'm pulling it out with a wet paintbrush. Of course, if you've got the 90 set, you will have the blender in there, and you can do that with the blender. And here I'm just putting a bit of colour on, again pulling it out with a wet paintbrush, so you can see how quite easily you can build up your picture. If you want to do leaves, then just hold your pen upright and add colour, more of the darker colour, less of a lighter colour, but basically the countryside is never one green. Right, here's one that I've done earlier, and I've put some double-sided tape on this. This is why I'm turning to this one. So I've got my frame. What I'm going to do now is decide where I want the frame and the picture, and I'm just going to use a piece of masking tape just to hold it in place for me. I just pull that down a little bit further because I'm now going to use a cloud template, and I want to do the two at the same time. So this is the Hobby Art cloud template. I'm using tumbled glass distress ink. You could use oxide or another colour, and I'm just pulling up with a sponge. You could use a distress tool, and what I'm doing is I'm turning it round and I'm doing right across the sky inside as well. So keep changing it until you're happy with the, I would take a little bit longer if I had more time, but you know, just basically go right across until you're happy with the results. I'm just sort of doing it a little bit randomly there, but going down, that would do nicely. Okay, so when that comes off, you can actually see on there that gives you a guide, so you can go back into place. I'm going to take the double-sided tape off. There we are. Obviously I would normally use glue or put more tape on, but this is for speed. So what you need to do is you need to line up your clouds, and then decide where you've already decided where you want your picture, and then just place this over the black border and card, and it may be at a weird angle like that, but that's exactly where you wanted it. Okay, then you're going to put foam tape on the back of your frame, and I would normally stand up for this bit, so keep your fingers crossed I get it straight, and I would normally stand above it, which is easier. And then the double-sided foam tape, the theory is that will line up, and that's it. There's your finished card.